Yeah, what do you do when the guilt doesn't cease? The morning after a fall, crying, Lord, will you send relief? Yeah, relief, yeah, relief, please.
Hello and welcome to iAnalyze, probably the only vlog on the internet that takes fairy tales and folklore and then looks at them with an analytic standpoint, and it's probably the best one since it's the only one. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at this story. It's kind of a weird one. It's called Devil and the Three Golden Hairs. It's by the Brothers Grimm, and yeah, I'm just going to give you a summary of it. I'm not going to read it or anything, but yeah, so basically what happens is there's this kid, and when he's born, there's a prophecy that he's going to marry the king's daughter. And the king doesn't like the thought of his son, or his daughter rather, being married to some random peasant. So he makes a trade with the parents for the kid, which I don't get how they give away their kid so easily, but nonetheless, they do it. And then when he gets the kid, he sends him down the river in a box, thinking, the box will sink and he'll drown. Kind of like Moses, because the kid doesn't die, and he gets raised by another family. And the king finds this out again and tries to have him killed a second time by giving him a letter to give to the queen while he's in battle. And the kid is halfway there and he's tired, so he takes a nap where there's a bunch of burglars around or whatever, and they feel bad for him. They read the note, they replace it with one that says, give him your daughter's hand in marriage. So he goes to the queen, gives her the letter, and she's like, oh, this is from my husband. It says to give our daughter to this guy. All right, cool. So the king gets back, and he's not very happy that this guy he tried to kill married his daughter. So anyway, what ends up happening is the kid's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's such a huge misunderstanding. I'll do anything to prove myself to you. So the king has a bit of a weird request. He's like, all right, I want you to go all the way to hell, find the devil, and take 3 golden hairs off his head. And the kid's like, all right, sure. Ain't nothing I won't do. So he gets on his horse, actually not literally, he walks there, and on his way he meets these 2 guards from 2 different cities who are having problems, and he's like, can you give us the answer to these problems? He's like, sure, when I'm on my way back. And then the final guy he meets is the guy who rides the ferry to hell. He takes people from mainland Europe to hell. It's kind of weird. Anyway, so they're on the boat, and the guy's like, all right, can you tell me how I can get out of this life? I'm not really all about it. I'm not liking it. It's like, sure, on my way back I will. So anyway, that's not even the weirdest part of the story, because he hops off the ferry and there's just a cave, and apparently that cave leads to hell. So he walks in and he sees the devil's grandmother sitting there in a rocking chair, and she's like, oh, he doesn't like humans. What do you want? I just need 3 hairs from his head so I can keep my wife. She's like, all right, cool. I'll turn you into an ant, hop into the flap on my dress, and we're good. And I'll ask him, and I'll get his hair and ask him, and anything else. And he's like, yeah, can you ask him these 3 questions for me? And she's like, sure. So anyway, he hops in the folds of the dress, and the devil comes home. It's like, I smell humans. And she's like, no, there isn't. You're just used to it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so the devil's sleeping. She pulls out the 3 hairs, asks the 3 questions, and on the way back, the fairy guy's like, yo, dude, so how do I get out of this life of being a ferry driver? I'm not really digging it, you know? I asked you about that. He's like, yeah, what you need to do is, this is what I heard the devil say, so you know it's got to be true. Next person that hops in your boat, just make them row it and then just run off, and they'll be stuck being the new ferry driver. He's like, oh, true. I'll let you get off, though. So Buddy leaves, and he passes the other guys, gives them their answers. He goes home, and the king's rattled. He's like, yo, you actually made it back? I didn't think you would. And then the king goes to, I guess he goes to hell to go give the devil a piece of his mind or whatever, and he meets that same ferry driver, and the ferry driver just hops out, and he's like, see ya, sucker. And the king is stuck rowing the boat forever, basically. And yeah, it's a really weird story. I mean, that's just weird. It's by the Brothers Grimm, obviously, and they grew up in Germany, so it's kind of safe to assume this is where that story was. Anyway, from a new historicism point of view, that's what we're going to be getting into now. So, as far as new historicism goes, there's plenty of that in this. First, let's take a look at the Brothers Grimm and their life growing up, because you can actually see a lot of that in this book. So, basically, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, whoops, dropped something. Yeah. They grew up really poor, and their father died and their grandfather died before they even hit 12 years old. So they were pretty much, at that time, you know, the males of the family kind of stepped up to provide and whatever, so they were kind of thrust into that role where they had to provide for their whole family. So yeah, you can see that kind of translated, I mean, into how the kid loses his parents twice. Like, his first parents give him up, his second parents kind of coerce with the king to make sure that he gets that letter to the queen that had his own death sentence in it. So I mean, it's obviously a lot more extreme, but you see the parents leaving his life kind of like it did in the lives of the Brothers Grimm. Also, and this kind of connects to Marxism a bit, but Marxism hadn't been invented yet because Marx was still like when this book was written, when this story was written, Karl Marx was still a baby essentially, or I don't even know if he was born yet actually. Anyway, nevertheless, before Marx kind of wrote down Marxism or whatever, and really advocated for socialism, there's something called pre-socialist thinking, and that's essentially what I see a lot in this book. And so basically, the whole class division, which later became characterized as the bourgeoisie and the proletarian or whatever. The kid obviously in this book obviously starts off as, you know, he's poor, he's with a windmill fam, like the family's job is they do windmills and they like get the wheat, whatever, and that's what they do. And so you kind of see that he's at the lowest point and the king's at the highest point. And then at the end they end up switching because he's the prince and because he marries the king's daughter out of poverty, and then he becomes a prince, which means he's in power at that time. And the king ends up having to cart people back and forth on that ferry to hell, which, I mean, I still can't say that and not think it's crazy. But still, I mean, you just see the way their roles reverse from the king being the powerful one going to being the lower one, and the one who was the lower one becoming the powerful one in a way, I guess. So there's definitely that connection there. It's kind of Marxist, but it also speaks at the time because there's a lot of people thinking, wait, why do we let the monarchy make all this decisions for us? We want to have a say in things. We want democracy. This was fresh off the tail of the French Revolution, the American Revolution, stuff like that. So there was a lot of thinking like, hey, why don't we get more of a say? Why can't we have more power? And you see a lot of that in this. And furthermore, there's also the fact that in Europe at that time, this is when the nationalism movement when countries start to unify and really take a sense of national pride, largely based on the fact that instead of saying, this is my king and we love him, they're like, this is our country and we love him. So you see the cry for democracy more and more. And you almost see, like, I think that the kid becoming the prince or whatever and snaking his way into the decision-making process of the government kind of speaks to what all the people wanted, in that they wanted to reach that level of having a say in what happened in their country, in the same way that this kid who was a nobody had such a say of what was going on, because obviously he becomes a prince. The book doesn't talk about it, but you can infer that he ends up becoming king after the king was stuck doing the ferry boat, whatever. You can infer that this kid becomes the king and he has say over everything. That's kind of what everybody wanted. They wanted a say. They wanted democracy. And finally, just some more perspective on the lives of the Brothers Grimm or whatever. When they graduated university or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, well, like they had the same kind of class division at their university, so it's like, oh, all these, they didn't really get much recognition for it. So anyway, they go on to become librarians and research for the first collection of fairy tales, which this particular story is in. And their works catch on. They're like iconic throughout Germany and whatever. And they end up getting honorary doctorates from the universities that kind of, you know, was pushed them off to the side, like, oh yeah, we have them, whatever. But yeah, you just see that same kind of rising from the bottom to the top in their own lives, and see how they put that into the story itself. So yeah, just a lot of parallels to their life and the life of this kid, even though they didn't take a magical boat ride to hell. So yeah, thanks for checking out this awesome episode of iAnalyze, and I hope you come back again later. I don't know what's in store next, but it's gonna be awesome.